Well, hey everybody, welcome another episode of the Nonprofit Show. We are so excited that you're here with us because we have, as we like to say in production, we have the big get. And the big get is Pearl Hoagland because she's the director of Fundraising Academy, the woman who I work with to get all of this stuff done. But you don't get to see her very often. And so it's really an exciting opportunity for me personally to get with the Brain Trust and really learn about, her perspective through Fundraising Academies at National University. So are you ready to rock and roll, my friend?
I am ready, and I just would love for you to write my resume and always introduce me. But thanks for having me again. I love being here, and I'm ready to get started.
Get started, my friend. Well, again, I'm Julia Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy, joined today by Pearl Hoagland, Director of Fundraising Academy at National University. You know, National University is the sponsor of Ask and Answer with us, and they partner with us because we were so impressed with all of their experts. And so we liked having somebody that we felt would give a good answer, but could like talk about a lot of things. I mean, we get questions from all over, and they're wackadoo, and so we needed somebody who could, bob and weave through this field of questions. It really are sometimes tough questions. So we wanted to talk about that with them, and this has just really been fun. Along this journey with us are all of our presenting sponsors: Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, Be Generous, of course, Fundraising Academy at National University, Staffing Boutique, Nonprofit Thought Leader, and Nonprofit Nerd. Those are the folks that are with us each and every day. We're coming up on 700 episodes, with which you can find those on Roku, YouTube, Amazon Fire TV, and Vimeo. You can also now, this year, find us on podcast. Kevin Pace, our intrepid executive producer, has now put every episode for this last year into podcast format. So wherever you like to queue up your content, we're there. And it's really, really exciting because we have just an amazing archive of our podcast for the last year. Okay, my friend, are you ready to dig in?
Let's dig in.
Okay. So, CEO, name withheld from Phoenix. Now, I'm going to man up and tell you that this is a real person who I know, who came up to me at a very, very large community breakfast. About 1,200 people in the ballroom. One of the most significant one-day events in our community. And they were like, hey, I need this question asked of your folks, but don't identify me because I don't want to get in trouble. Right? And I said,
Wow.
okay, I'm going to put that you came from my community, and then let's see what the experts say. So it says, I'm trying to get our board interested and educated about fundraising. I just need a place to start. I know this won't happen overnight. It's a fascinating, like, hours long conversation.
Yeah. First, I'd say send them to us.
Yeah.
We just, full on plug. We do have a number of board members who come through our organization. Granted, when I read this question, this is definitely not unique to this organization.
Yeah.
Engaging board in fundraising is always, or very often, there's some sort of challenge or hurdle there. Agreed, this doesn't happen overnight. A few things I would recommend. One, look at their skill sets. There is this misconception that all board members need to be soliciting or actively fundraising, right? The actual solicitation process, but there are so many ways that board members can actually support the fundraising process. We know not everyone is comfortable making an ask. Perhaps they don't run in a circle that would translate to a big financial gift, but there are other ways to support. So on the back end, look at their skill sets so you can support them, train them and help them identify where they feel most comfortable. And I'm happy to share a few of those tips, but also when you're looking at bringing on board members, I would look at what is the job description? What are the expectations? Every board member needs to know they are going to support fundraising in some capacity.
Right.
It should be part of the job description to support that organization that you want to help create more sustainable growth for.
I love you just like twisted something in my brain. And that is, I've been very militant about when you're on a board, you have to fundraise. That from day one, that's always been like my thing. But I love the more approachable word that you used, and that is support. Because when you say you have to fundraise, it like puts up a wall and it's stressful and it's combative.
Yeah.
But when you said support, that just completely changed the mindset because everybody wants to be supportive. Everybody wants to help row in the same direction.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Not
So,
right.
when you think about the three phases, the 8 pieces of the cause selling cycle, there got to be ways that each board member, if they understand what the options are, that they can learn how to engage. I think that's magical. Good job, Pearl.
Thank you. And I would also say to the CEO, please give your development staff access to your board. Facilitate that connection and relationship because your development staff, they're driving the fundraising goal. So they will be able to inform how your board can support fundraising. Whatever that looks like at your organization, I recognize those dynamics are different, but I have seen too many organizations where the development staff have no access to the board. And often those boards are not successfully supporting their fundraising goals because, again, there's that disconnect.
So before we move on, then I kind of hear you from that saying that your development team should be at the board meetings.
Perhaps if that is what makes sense, it really depends on the organization. I know some teams where there's a certain person who manages that relationship. Yeah. So they keep the board informed. They bring lists to the board and say, who do you know on this list? Yeah. Can you help me host a gathering? Or can you help me prospect for these people or steward? Or I'm going to make the ask, but will you help cultivate this relationship and come with me to the meeting and talk about why you're on the board? And then I will make the ask. So there are ways for them to really be a team player and kind of a sidekick for the development team.
Spoiler alert, Pearl's going to be on with us next week for a drill down 2 days in a row. And the topic is riveting. It's how to get, beyond the gatekeeper and how to create a relationship with the gatekeeper. And I always think that a board meeting that during if you're served dinner or, pizza or during the prep time or whatever, board meetings where they circulate those lists and they're just like, let us know if you know anybody. And it's been riveting over my career in community service. The number of people that will be like, what the hell? That CEO? They're my neighbor. And people will be like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. Or we serve on a board together. Yeah. Or I'm in the Rotary with them. Exactly.
Yeah. And it's like all along, there's been a relationship. Going back to your word, support. Super cool. What a great way to start another episode of Ask and Answer. This is great. I feel like we can go home now because that's revealed all to me.
Wrap it up.
It really has. Good job. Well, let's go on to the next question. And this is an interesting question that's come in from Alex from Lexington, Kentucky. We're getting ready to expand our leadership team with a COO, Chief Operating Officer. Gotta say, I'm hearing about this more and more. Should we look internally for someone who knows our organization or search outside for talent who knows the position or job description? Really interesting question. I am fascinated by this.
I love this question. First of all, disclaimer, I am not in HR. So granted, the things that I say, always be sure that you're speaking to your HR team. I have a few questions in response. One is, does your organization provide upward mobility for your high performing staff, leadership development, professional development? And I ask that because people in management positions are not just responsible for technical, items, but they're responsible for leading people and managing people. So how wonderful to have an organization where there is that upward mobility, where people know they have a future in this organization. Knowing that as you're promoting people, that you're ensuring that they're responsible for the organizational culture, for staff retention, that they are able to have those technical skills, or perhaps what can they learn on the job or through professional development, but can they manage people? That's just, I would say for organizations, there are so many studies that connect staff retention to organizational culture, and then staff retention to productivity, organizational performance. So if you're just hiring for the skills and you want to look external, make sure it's the right fit. If you want to hire internal, make sure that you are doing the entire organization justice by bringing people, like leaders, up into those positions, not just people who have the skills.
You know, I would have never said that because I wouldn't have taken that. I wouldn't have taken that view. But that's your approach is much more holistic to the overarching approach to how an organization can exist, and especially with all this change and it's a tough time. It has been, and it looks like it's going to be a different tough time with the economy. I like that approach because what I hear you saying is that, we can teach a job or we can teach skills in that area, but we may not be able to teach so readily leadership and, leadership management and culture as we can the tasks associated with a specific job. And so, yeah, I like what you said. I wouldn't have gone there immediately. But yeah, understanding the soul and the heart of an organization, is probably super, super important. And when you go up against what the actual task management of a job, and especially to an organization that hasn't had this job.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it sounds to me from this question that they haven't had this position.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a lot of learning for everybody.
Yeah, which is a great opportunity. I would say just the one other piece that I just have to say is when you look at leadership in the world and you look at the demographics, representation there isn't a lot of representation right now when you look at the leadership demographics. So depending on what your organization does, the communities that you serve, I would also think through that lens. Does your leadership and the makeup of your staff, is that representative of the community that you're in and the communities that are of value, right? That you work with and support. So just another lens when you're looking at hiring, you're looking at building your team, just ensuring that you have that lens is so critical. And that brings new voices to your organization as well, and new perspectives that you might need, especially in a role that you haven't yet actually had.
Yeah. I love that you said that because my big bugaboo about that is language. I live in a community where we were a part of Mexico only 150 years ago, and we have a very, very strong Hispanic culture. I could go on and on and on. And I am horrified by the number of organizations that serve a Spanish speaking population, maybe as much as 50-50 or more. And they don't have people on their boards who speak Spanish or even a little
Wow.
bit.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, gosh, come on. We've got to be better than this. We've got to understand this. So I love all that you said. Alex, we've given you a lot to think about, my friend.
Good luck.
I know. Alex is like, wait, don't go. I have more questions.
I would really love to hear, Alex, if you're listening, I would love to know what you end up doing.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. Because that's super, super important. Okay, Jacob from New York writes, how common is it for the CEO to have an employment contract?
So I don't know how prevalent they are, but I have seen arguments for them. And I can say at Fundraising Academy, one thing that we talk about is a 501c3 is a tax status. It's not a business model. this is something, there's butting of heads in this, right? Especially in
There are.
fundraising. Yeah,
Yeah.
even cause selling it pushes buttons because it is a business focused, relationship driven fundraising style. There is a movement that we are a part of to further professionalize the role of fundraising and the nonprofit industry.
Mhm.
Optics don't always fall in line with the reality about the role. Often you hear, I fell into this, or, I was volunteering in this, I didn't even know it could be a job, versus, hey, I'm going to study this because I want to raise money for this, for an organization that does this type of work. So that extends also to when you look at this question, for example, I think a contract, depending, again, every organization is different. So take it or leave it, depending on what your organization is like. But some of the benefits of a contract with a CEO is it establishes expectations, not only for the CEO, but so the staff too, they can feel protected by a contract. They know what the expectations are of the CEO. The board knows the expectations and the CEO knows the expectations of them. So that you're going into a role with that clear understanding of what success looks like.
Mhm.
Performance reviews, all of that, there's accountability. I can see a lot of benefits to having that in place, again, depending on the organization and the culture at that organization.
When you said your answer is so interesting to me because what I hear you saying, it's almost like you should have, to me, you should have this in the form of a job description. And when I see this question, it almost makes me think like they don't have a robust enough job description. And maybe that's like throughout the organization because a contract would, for me, and I don't know what you think about this, but I kind of think that's a contract.
Yeah. And I see
You know?
contract too with the term limit or,
Yeah.
um, yeah, exactly. A job description, maybe the benchmarks that you have to meet.
Yeah.
Also recognizing that a term limit, if you think about that, a CEO, the change that they're going to affect in year one may not actually manifest, or the
Yeah.
impact might not happen for some time. So I do think it's just more realistic
Hmm.
to recognize realistically what can the CEO achieve in the first year,
Hmm.
to inform that performance evaluation so that they can be set up for success versus turn this around tomorrow. It's in your job description.
Right, right. It's really interesting. I think that I'm starting to hear more about this,
Mm-hmm.
and recently, and maybe this is the reason why, is that I haven't heard good things. And you know how it is. They always
Interesting.
say you hear something bad times more than you something good once, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
more amplified. But it seems to me that it is really easy to kind of get some acrimony in between the parties that are trying to figure this out.
Yeah.
Because generally, that CEO would have their own representation, and then the board would have additional representation, and then that there would be some dialogue back and forth. But maybe that starting point to your point to what you said is that robust job description that really
Yeah.
needs to be in place. Needs to be in place. And
Right. And that's a good, I agree, that's a good, I guess, in between, if you think about it, a good
yeah,
compromise, because it's still the thing that when I think about a CEO contract, recognizing we don't, right, I'm not in the business of doing that. So I
yeah,
haven't been too involved in that. Is it, there needs to be some negotiation and discussion of what's realistic so
right.
that everyone's on the same page. So whether it's a contract or, like you said, a job description or just the negotiation piece,
Mhm.
really it's clear expectations for all, accountability, for every party. And I think that is, like you said, that is where you should start. And if that's in the form of a contract, fine, but how do you ensure that all the pieces are in place so everyone's set up for success?
Yeah, I love it. Well, I think that's a great way to think about this, and I just feel like this is going to be something that we're going to be hearing more and more about. So it's best to be kind of thinking about this before you're in the middle of a hire and wondering, oh my gosh, we never thought about this.
Right.
This comes to us from an event committee. An entire committee wrote this in, and we took off the city because frankly, it was such a specific question that we didn't want to identify the group because they're in the process of trying to figure this out. The question is this, Pearl. What do you think about co-branded fundraising events? Specifically, we are looking at three cultural groups working together on a spring gala. Now, I'll tell you, it's a symphony, a ballet, and an opera company.
Ah, okay.
And
Wow.
so, they have a similar patron base. They
Mm-hmm.
have like there's some operas where they might have, dancers performing. There are ballets where they certainly always have, well, not always, but generally have, live orchestra. I mean, there's a symbiotic relationship between these three organizations for sure. But let's be realistic, they compete. They
Mm-hmm.
compete for money, for attention, for talent, even performance
Mm-hmm.
resources. So, a co-branded fundraising event. What do you think?
So first, I love this question. I think it is beautiful that they're looking at this collaboration. I would ask what the desired outcome is.
Mhm,
This is where I wish it was a two-way conversation.
mhm.
Depending on the desired outcome, when we look at the Giving USA report, they publish new data every single year that talks about charitable giving, and we see an increase in charitable giving more or less year over year. Our goal through our work at Fundraising Academy is not for organizations to take money from another, or that would have been slated for another organization, but to grow philanthropy, to you have another kid, your heart
Yeah,
expands. You love another
yeah,
organization, your wallet expands. And
I
that,
love that.
so I
I
would
have
just
to
say,
say,
isn't
Pearl,
that's silly, but it's
no,
true. The
I love
goal
it.
is that if you have followed the steps of the cause selling cycle, hopefully you have developed a strong relationship with the donor and turned them into a loyal champion of your organization. So now if you have a co-branded event, you are potentially introducing them to something that matters to them in addition to what you do.
Yeah, yeah,
So it really goes back to the relationships you have with your donors. Now,
yeah.
granted, this is easier said than done. There are donors who cannot give more. So yes, perhaps that's a risk, but there are a lot of donors out there who are looking for collaborations. They want to support organizations that are working together for a common goal.
Right.
These three groups, they care about arts in the community.
Yeah,
That is a common goal that will hit a lot of donors. And if they see
yeah.
more organizations working together, I think it's a really great idea as long as you're very clear about your expectations, the roles, each of your
Yeah,
goals, how you support each other. Ensure that you are going into this with very clear outcomes,
yeah,
and very clear terms through this collaboration. And once you have that conversation, that might actually determine whether it is a good idea or not. But I mean, the idea of nonprofits collaborating, that is definitely of interest to many donors and just for our community. If we truly want to have impact, that's one way to do it.
yeah. I loved what you just said, and I want to amplify that. And that is stepping back and trying to figure out what the structure is and the management of this, and then determining how it goes. Because I'm a big believer and have had chaired many events. It's not a one-off. You're
Mm-mm.
working towards the second and third years when you're in
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
first year as a co-chair. I mean, or a
Yeah.
chair. It's not a one and done thing. And so,
Yeah.
what is it you're looking at that goes beyond the single spring date, right?
Yeah.
Spring date 2023. Okay, yeah, and spring date 2024. You,
24.
you got to
Yeah.
be thinking about this to maximize your work and understand how it can benefit everyone. So
Mm-hmm.
I love what you said about really backing up, spending the time on the management and the structure, who's pulling what weight, how do you administrate that?
Mm-hmm.
It almost seems to me in one way, perhaps a wise move would be to find, uh, for lack of a better word, an event planner, but a management
Mm-hmm.
profile of somebody that it doesn't come directly from one of the three groups, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that they're professional that understands what the task management is.
Mm-hmm.
Whew. But it could be a total blowout.
It could be
Fabulous
amazing.
thing.
And
Yeah.
think about just the streamlining of that and how efficient that could be once you've maybe done that one year.
Yeah.
Pooling your resources together that, oh gosh, any way to minimize impact to a team's bandwidth is, if it does in fact do that, is, I think, very appealing.
I think it's super cool. I really, really love it. And I think, there are people that'll be like, yeah, I go to the symphony because I like the music. I can't stand the screeching of the opera. And then you hear people that are like, I go to the opera because when you go to the symphony, it's boring. You just watch the people play. I mean, it's really interesting to talk to people from
Yeah.
the cultural side of things. Like, what do they like and what speaks to them?
Hmm.
They're not all the same.
It's
But
true.
but to your point, there's a cultivation opportunity there that's really powerful. Well,
Yeah.
this has been so much fun. I mean, I told you, I say this every time we're together. This time flies by. It goes by really, really fast. Pearl Hoagland,
It
Director,
does.
Fundraising Academy, National University. What a joy you have been and are always when we get our time together. Really, really exciting. I want to make sure that I give enough time for you, if you will, very quickly to talk about your new portal because Fundraising Academy has this really interesting. I just feel like it's a digital library that you've thrown open the doors and said, "Come on in. We'll give you a library card for free."
Yes, no, and note on, it's no cost to you. We absorb the cost so that you don't have to. It's thank you for letting me quickly touch on it. It is an online learning library. As Julia mentioned, that's interactive. We consistently post new content to it, but it is where all of our on-demand content is available to support you and your fundraising practice. For example, if you are pursuing your CFRE certification, all of our webinars offer CFRE credits, and you can watch the webinars on our portal. In just a few months, you'll be able to watch our live webinars through our portal. You can access your CFRE tracker. We just launched a My Progress tracker, so you can track all of your education through the portal and then find, how many CFRE credits have you earned, pull
Yeah.
those trackers. We have fundraising templates, whether it's a prospecting qualification worksheet. So really, if you need more information, tips, templates, sample even questions to ask donors, to be sure that you're really cultivating them in a way that develops that relationship, builds trust, and ensures you get the information you need to make a successful ask, we've got it. And we continue to add content pretty much every week to
Awesome.
it.
It's so impressive. Jarrett Ransom, my co-host, the nonprofit nerd, and I say all the time, if we had had this, I mean, in my case, 30, 40 years ago, I would have raised millions, millions upon millions of dollars more for my community. I know it in my heart. Not as a paid fundraiser, just as a community,
Yeah.
leader, because it's just so logical. It's so natural. It strips the fear out of what we associate the ask with, and it makes it a much deeper um, relationship as opposed to a one-off, twisting your arm to get an
Yeah.
ask, right? So,
Mhm.
yeah, check them out. It's a really cool structure and approach. And so, really, really amazing. Hey, this has just been fabulous. We want to make sure that we give a shout out to all of our presenting sponsors who are here with us day in and day out. Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, your part time controller, Be Generous, Fundraising Academy at National University, Staffing Boutique, Nonprofit Thought Leader, and the Nonprofit Nerd. Now, Monday, I'm super excited because I'm going to tease a 2-day episode. It's called a drill down. And I'm going to tease it with this quote that comes from the Cause Selling textbook. You got to cross the moat to get to the king. I've added, or queen,
Or queen, right?
or queen.
To
I
get to
added,
the leader.
yeah, to get to the king or queen. And I am really excited because we're going to talk about some very specific steps that help
Hmm.
you get through, not like around necessarily, but you engage with that gatekeeper so that you
Hmm.
can get to that level person that you want to get to or
Yeah.
organization. And it's going to be really exciting. And so, something that we've never really addressed to this degree. I mean, it is called a drill down, so it's 2 days of very specific instruction that I don't care what you do. This will really help you be a better performer within your nonprofit. Hey, Pearl, have a great weekend.
Thank you too. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, you've been wonderful. I always love your approaches and thoughts. They're different than mine, and so it's really fun. It's really fun for me. So I do appreciate it. I really, really do. Hey, everybody, as we like to end every episode, we want to remind ourselves, our viewers, our listeners, and our guests to stay well so you can do well. We'll see you back here Monday with Pearl Hoagland, everybody. Pearl, thanks.